In the records of the Imperium's history, few chapters embody a harsh duality of loyalty and brutality as vividly as the Iron Hands. Born as the 10th Legion during the Emperor's monumental undertaking known as the Great Crusade, they were forged in order to bring light to the lost corners of the galaxy. Their origins and evolution reveal a relentless march towards a more mechanical perfection, if you will, through the rejection of all perceived weakness, epitomized by their open disdain for the frailty and weakness of the flesh. The saga of the Iron Hands begins on Terra during the closing days of the Unification Wars. Initially known as the Stormwalkers, the Legion drew heavily from the warlike cults of Old Albia, a region known for producing warriors of unparalleled physical resilience. These early recruits would be shaped into the Emperor's tools of conquest, tasked with reclaiming humanity's scattered remnants across the stars. The 10th Legion first entered the records of the Imperium's many wars, in particular with the crushing of the mutant Scythers, before obliterating the Xenos Lyrics on Obereth. Although victorious in both engagements, with surprisingly few losses, these campaigns showed no distinctive hallmarks for any styles of warfare. It was not until their deployment on the orc-held world of Rust that the methodology in which they would fight wars would be fully displayed. Here, they used massed firepower in slow grinding advances, which revealed a kernel of the legacy which the Legion would develop into its own tactical identity. However, everything would change once they would become reunited with their Primarch Ferrus Manus, a warrior of unyielding resolve and a genius at the forge, comparable to both Fulgrim and Vulcan. Ferrus would instill an indomitable will into his Legion, reshaping them to fit his image, to the point that his very name became the Legion's moniker, and his philosophy of ruthless efficiency became their creed. Ferris Manis, while a master, smith, and leader, viewed weakness as anathema to all things. This ethos would become the Iron Hands' twisted doctrine. The Primarch's contempt for the weaknesses and frailty of humanity catalyzed the Legion's embrace of bionics. That, along with their strong alignment with the Adeptus Mechanicus, led to the Iron Hands viewing their body as a prison, vulnerable and impure. And with each implant, each augmentation, they felt one step closer to the purity that they sought. During the Great Crusade, the Iron Hands would become a hammer for the Emperor of unparalleled precision and brutality, annihilating countless foes to further the Emperor's grand design for humanity. Yet, this unwavering determination came with a price, a pride and brutality which at points surpassed both the Iron Warriors and the Emperor's children. Said pride and brutality would eventually earn them a reputation for cold-heartedness, even amongst their brethren legions. The legion's history, however, would take a rather tragic turn during the Horus Heresy proper, when Ferrus Manus, in his zealous pursuit for the Emperor's vision, would be martyred at the hands of his closest brother and friend Fulgrim of the Emperor's children. This loss shattered the Iron Hands, both militarily and spiritually, instilling a deep-seated hatred for any and all perceived weaknesses, not just in their enemies, but in themselves and their allies. Following the Horus Heresy, the Codex Astartes decreed the division of the vast legions into small, manageable chapters. The Iron Hands endured as one of these original first founding chapters, perpetuating their Primarch's legacy and identity. Despite their unwavering faith in the Emperor, they remain unique amongst the Adeptus Astartes for their extreme reverence for machinery and their rather entwined relationship with the Adeptus Mechanicus. This symbiosis is more than a pragmatic belief. It is doctrinal at this point. The Iron Hands see augmentation as not merely practical improvements, but as a manner and a methodology for spiritual ascension. To them, every replaced limb and every defeated foe brings them closer to the purity that might one day allow them to stand beside their lost Primarch. To understand the Iron Hands is to understand the paradox that they have become, a chapter that clings to humanity's noblest of ideals, of unity and progress while simultaneously rejecting the flesh that binds them to their origins. Their history is a tale of triumph, tragedy, and an unyielding desire to purge all weakness, whether in themselves or via purging the enemies of mankind. In their relentless pursuit of perfection, the Iron Hands are poised to become a testament to the Emperor's grand design, an unyielding and unbroken and an unrepentant machine geared towards the survival and glory of humanity. When the galaxy was torn asunder by the Horus Heresy, the Iron Hands would find themselves far from Terra, unable to intervene as the Imperium was plunged into civil war. Their Primarch Ferris Manus, so consumed by his rage and fury, not only at the betrayal of those legions who had fallen to chaos, but by the particular treachery of his closest brother, Fulgrim, the Primarch of the Emperor's children. This rage was compounded by his inability to strike directly at the traitors. With a fury born of bitter determination, Ferrus Manus mustered his most hardened Astartes and set course for the Isstvan system, where destiny awaited him. The Isstvan V campaign, or as it would later become known as, the Dropsite Massacre, was a pivotal point in the history of the Iron Hands. This catastrophic betrayal would define their chapter for millennia to come. Alongside the Raven Guard and the Salamanders, the Iron Hands formed a veritable venerable vanguard of loyalist forces tasked with confronting the traitors led by War Master Horus. However, what awaited them was no ordinary battle, but a meticulously and expertly orchestrated ambush. In the chaos of the Dropsite Massacre, the Loyalist legions found themselves unable to hold their own as, regardless of their unparalleled valor, they were completely overwhelmed and outgunned. Yet their bravery failed to shield them from treachery. Ferrus Manus would then seek to confront Fulgrim directly, the brother who had betrayed both his father and their bond. This confrontation ended in utter and complete tragedy, with Fulgrim wielding a legendary demon blade, tainted by the vile, voracious influences of Slaanesh, which allowed him to strike down Ferrus Manus, severing his head with a single, devastating, elegant blow. This loss would go on to shatter the Iron Hands, as they would be undone by their own Primarch's hubris, leading to a shattering of the belief that they held so true, that strength alone could triumph over all, even treachery. And with the wicked blade swing of Fulgrim was this vision, this ethos, and the identity of the Iron Hands shattered. The massacre that would also decimate their ranks left the Iron Hands as one of these so-called shattered legions. Despite the traitor's declaration of Ferrus Manus' death, the Iron Hands refused to believe it and accept the grim reality. While the Primarch's body was recovered, his head would never be. Yet, the Iron Hands would attempt to create a pantomime of their Primarch by desecrating his body and attempting to make a mechanical puppet in order to stand in. This puppet would at one point incense and enrage Vulcan, so much so that he would reprimand the entire legion and destroy the remains of his brother in order to prevent such a disgusting act of desecration to occur again. For over 10,000 standard years, the chapter has nurtured an unyielding hatred, channeling it into an inexhaustible engine of vengeance. The Iron Hands' belief that the flesh is weak is deeply entwined with their experiences during the Horus Heresy. To them, flesh is a symbol of vulnerability, a subject to decay, corruption, and betrayal. Their conviction in the superiority of the machine over flesh is not merely a philosophical one, it is a doctrine rooted in their survival and the enduring, ever-ongoing quest for strength. This creed has also been shaped by the stoic resilience of the people of Medusa, their desolate homeworld. Medusa's harsh environment has led to a rather hardy group of inhabitants who have instilled the Iron Hands and their culture with a steadfastness that would carry them throughout the trials and tribulation of their now shattered legacy. Following the death of Ferrus Manus, the Iron Hands would withdraw to Medusa, where their hatred smoldered like embers in a forge, as they would become increasingly insular and suspicious of others, isolating themselves not only from the Imperium at large, but even from their fellow Astartes. After the second founding, this isolation deepened further still, transforming them into bitter recluses, their ire no longer solely reserved for the traitors. Loyalists, they believe, bore equal guilt for failing to prevent the Horus Heresy, and for allowing the Emperor to fall. This self-imposed exile and all-encompassing rage became a shield against the perceived weakness and madness that encompassed the galaxy. For the Iron Hands, no one was truly their ally. Not the Imperium, and not even themselves. No one was free from the stain of failure. The Iron Hands would endure as a chapter defined by loss and an uncompromising, unending, largely unsuccessful pursuit for greater strength. Their fury was not seen as a reckless flame, but a carefully stoked fire, driving them in a singular direction, forward into battle. And in their ceaseless conquests, they would purge weakness wherever they found it. The memory of Ferris Manus would become both a source of pain and inspiration. Within the cold void of the galaxy, the Iron Hands would stand apart, as an unstoppable and unforgiving force of nature, as they would bear the scars of betrayal and loss openly, with each mechanical limb and implant, their legacy in essence shaped by the tragedies of the past, and their hopes for the future anchored in the belief that their Primarch may somehow return. Until that day comes, they will continue to march relentlessly, their hatred a beacon in the darkness, and their resolve a testament to the Emperor's grand design. The Iron Hands chapter of the 41st Millennium has now been fractured into clan companies, yet they are united in the purpose of acting as a chapter, all of them carrying the same profound grudge, one that burns as fiercely as their hatred for flesh. However, they reserve a special loathing for the successor chapters of their fellow Shattered Legions, in particular for those of the Salamanders and the Raven Guard. This is because they believe that had these two legions fought alongside the Iron Hands in full force during the calamitous dropsite massacre instead of retreating, the Iron Hands believe they would have somehow won the day. They contend that, contrary to reason and history, that had the Salamanders and Raven Guard fought on, their Primarch Ferrus Manus might not have fallen in battle. This bitterness extends far beyond their animosity towards others, as the Iron Hands see frailty not just in retreat or surrender, but within the very essence of organic life itself. To them, the flesh is weak, a fragile, corruptible, and transitory fact of life. This belief underpins every aspect of their culture and war doctrine. For the Iron Hands, the ultimate answer to humanity's impermanence lies in the cold perfection of machinery. From the moment an aspirant is initiated into the chapter, the transformation begins. A ritual rooted in the legend of their Primarch leads neophytes to undergo a removal of their left hand, which will eventually be replaced by a bionic one. This practice recalls and mirrors the tale of Ferris Manus, whose hands were encased in living metal after his fabled battle with the monstrous metallic serpent of Medusa. The ritual varies, with some initiates severing their own hand, while others endure the excruciating pain of plunging their hand into molten rivers of lava on Medusa, transforming their agony into iron within. This rejection of the flesh grows with each passing standard year. An Iron Hand battle brother comes to despise their biological body regardless of what it provides them, as if it were a wretched burden, and replacing it piece by piece with superior bionics seems to be the only solution. By the time he has served several centuries, a warrior may almost be entirely mechanical, with only the barest organic components essential for their survival being left, the brain and some scattered vital organs being all that's left of their original human form. This relentless pursuit of perfection often leads to dismemberment, and for the most venerable warriors, integration into the iron bodies of dreadnoughts is not seen as a macabre necessity of combat, but rather a blessing. These ancient lumbering machines are not just war engines to the chapter, they are the leaders of the Iron Hands, collectively forming the Iron Council. These dreadnoughts embody the chapter's rejection of weakness and its unyielding resolve. The Iron Hands have no singular chapter master. Instead, their governance is decentralized, as each clan company operates independently, roaming the barren landscapes of Medusa in mobile fortress monasteries. These clan companies protect the planet's scattered nomadic tribes, from which they recruit further battle brothers, where only the strongest and most resilient individuals will be deemed worthy. The Iron Hand's near total rejection of the flesh has sparked accusations of heresy amongst many. Some even whisper that this obsession may draw from a deeply seated gene flaw, which would perhaps explain the scarcity of successor chapters sired by the Iron Hands. Their detractors argue that replacing the organs gifted by the Emperor and Ferrus Manus with bionics is an affront to the sacred inheritance of the Astartes. Yet none can deny the efficiency of the Iron Hands in battle. The Iron Hands and their hatred for the weakness of the flesh and all things fuels their grim resolve. These are traits that have broken countless enemies of the Imperium. For all their bitterness and isolation, the Iron Hands remain steadfastly loyal to the Emperor and his vision, their wrath becoming an unyielding, red-hot iron upon which the enemies of mankind shall fall. The Iron Hands' journey is one of unrelenting, unending transformation. From their early days they sought to transcend the limitations of the flesh, forging themselves into instruments of war, as unbreakable as their namesake. Despite their scars, both physical and spiritual, they stand unyielding, driven by an enduring belief that through hatred and purging of weakness, they may honor the legacy of Ferris Manus, who they believe will one day return to lead them. In the cold void of the 41st millennium, the Iron Hands march on, their footsteps echoing with the weight of their mechanical forms and the unyielding fury that has defined their existence for over 10 millennia. As the machine does not falter, neither shall they. From the onset of their formative years to the records of the Great Crusade, the Iron Hands have stood as a testament to deliberate precision and calculated genius, in particular that granted to them via their Primarch, Ferrus Manus, who was known for his methodical nature and his unyielding belief in logic. Ferris Manis would go on to forge his legion into a military force like no other, regimented to perfection. While many Space Marine legions relied on rigid hierarchies or universally applied structures, the Iron Hands embraced what might be described as organized compartmentalization. This strategic design was not simply a reflection of Ferrus Manus' engineering mind, but a profound adaptation of the harsh realities of war. Unlike the Emperor's children, whose finely layered hierarchy epitomized centralized order, or the Ultramarines who adhered to rationalized and codified doctrines, the Iron Hands operated as a collection of concentric, interdependent components. At the core of this structure were their orders, autonomous formations that combined companies, support elements, and logistical assets into a single unified whole. Each order functioned as an independent war machine capable of executing complex operations without outside support. Within an order, every unit would have a defined purpose, whether it was legionary squads, armored squadrons, auxiliary support, and only together would these components form a seamless network of interlocking functions, each piece vital to the order's overall efficiency, yet each piece able to fit more than one role at a time. This design mirrored the mechanical systems Ferrus Manus so admired, a collection of parts working in perfect harmony where the failure of one was not merely an inconvenience, but a potential catastrophe that could be averted. Orders would then be assigned tasks with singular focus, and success would be expected rather than an aspiration. Pride and honor would demand it, and failure was a concept foreign to the Iron Hands Legion and their ethos. This fierce interdependence sometimes would lead to rivalries, as orders coming from different clans would compete for glory, their pride driving them to greater and greater feats of valor and efficiency. At the heart of the Legion's identity were the clans, formations distinct from standard chapter organization or any other legion. While similar in scale, the clans were deeply rooted in the feudal cultures of Medusa, the Iron Hands' very homeworld. Medusa's nomadic tribes served as both a recruiting ground and a cultural foundation for the clans, allowing the environment to shape their characteristics of drive and self-sufficiency. Each clan functioned as a so-called pocket legion, fully capable of independent operations as they maintained their own logistics, armories, and void ships, their autonomy extending to governance as well. At the helm of each clan stood a chieftain, or an Iron Lord, whose authority was derived directly from Ferrus Manus. These leaders ruled their clans with an iron fist, enforcing discipline and ensuring that their warriors met the excruciating standards set by their Primarch. Yet the clans were more than just administrative units. They were competitive entities, each with its own identity and traditions. They would vie not only for battlefield glory, but for the limited resources every legion had, and for the favor of Ferrus Manus. These rivalries, while fierce, were tempered by a shared belief in their Primarch's vision, to the point that each clan viewed itself as a vital cog in the machine of the Legion, its success essential to the strength of the whole. The duality of cooperation and competition would for a long time define the Iron Hands' organizational philosophy. Orders, though autonomous, often drew resources from multiple clans, creating an environment where rivalries could either fracture any form of unity or push the Legion itself to greater heights. Ferris Manus encouraged this dynamic, believing that it honed the edge of his warriors and kept them from complacency. This system of compartmentalized autonomy and competitive independence made the Iron Hands uniquely adaptable, as they could deploy with precision and effectiveness at a higher efficiency than almost any other legion. Their orders and clans functioning as independent battle groups or uniting seamlessly into larger-scale campaigns. It also reflected the stoic and self-reliant culture of Medusa, leading to a greater integration between aspirants and the Space Marines themselves. The structure of the Iron Hands Legion as a whole was as much a reflection of Ferrus Manus' character as it was a product of his strategic vision. Where other armies saw his machines and assemblies of moving parts that, when properly calibrated, could achieve feats of unparalleled precision and power, he viewed it as a philosophy that was entrenched into every facet of his legion, from its orders to its clans to even its warriors, and the aspirants, neophytes, and humans who resided on Medusa. Though their methods might seem cold and unyielding, the Iron Hands' approach was forged in a crucible of necessity, as they sought perfection not for themselves, but to be better able to serve the Emperor and fulfill his dream of a united humanity. In their compartmentalized structure and relentless pursuit of efficiency, the Iron Hands embodied the iron resolve within their own Primarch. And this is a legacy that has endured even as the galaxy has torn itself asunder time and time again. Under the meticulous guidance of Ferrus Manus, the Iron Hands Legion would be crafted into an unstoppable force. Whether operating as a single company or with the full might of their legion amassed, their approach was methodical and crushing. The Legion itself pursued its objectives with a single-minded intensity, which often had them becoming immovable or unstoppable juggernauts. This unwavering focus could lead to extraordinary successes, but it also rendered the Legion slow to adapt or adopt new practices and change direction when the circumstances became those that demanded quick and excruciating flexibility. However, this was no accident. Ferrus Manus deliberately designed the Legion to concentrate authority and initiative into the hands of a few key leaders by creating distinct tiers of organizational structure. Doing this would lead him to ensure that responsibility and by extension accountability could easily be identified. This system allowed for the swift and decisive action along with the ruthless correction of anything when necessary at a moment's notice. Upon his command within the Iron Hands was a heavy burden, and those who bore it wielded the power over life and death. Each shield centurion, the commander of a company, possessed the authority to reward or punish their subordinates without recourse. This included the ultimate punishment of summary execution, should a legionary fail to meet expectations. Higher up the chain of command, Iron Captains held the same power over their subordinates, including officers, as did Iron Lords over their entire clans. The pinnacle of this hierarchy was Ferrus Manus himself, the undisputed master of the Legion. His word was absolute and unchallenged. Such a structure ensured unity and discipline, but also bared a culture of fear and relentless self-perfection, where failure was not allowed to be an option, or even a consideration. The Iron Hands maintained relatively consistent numbers of warriors throughout the later stages of the Great Crusade. This was a remarkable feat given their unforgiving recruitment practices, though in large part this was because of how few casualties they actually had. Potential recruits from Medusa were subjected to the trials, which many deemed exceptionally brutal, and only the strongest could survive and join the Legion. Even those who passed and faced the challenges in a manner that allowed them to join would continuously face new evaluations, their worth constantly judged against the Legion's ever-exacting standards. Those who failed, whether they be aspirants or even captured prisoners, often met a rather grim fate. Many would be transformed into servitors, their bodies and minds repurposed to serve the Legion's needs. To this day, it is whispered that such servitors formed the extensive labor force of Medusa's current existence, ensuring the chapters and at one time the Legion's war machine remained at peak conditions. If the warriors of the Iron Hands were unforgiving, their arsenal was no less fearsome. Thanks to the strongest ties between any legion and the Mechanicum being at the center of the Legion's own creation. That, along with the technological prowess that they inherited from Ferrus Manus, led the Legion to possess a vast and sophisticated array of war engines. Their arsenal included an unparalleled number of tanks, dreadnought walkers, advanced weaponry, and artillery, which were only rivaled by Petarobo's Iron Warriors. Amongst their armories were rare and powerful technologies, including special variants of grav weapons, conversion beamers, laser destroyers, amongst others. These weapons were rarely seen outside of the Mechanicum, and some of the rarer tools that the Iron Hands had could not be found anywhere else other than in the deepest vaults of the First Legion. This was in large part due to the Iron Hands having a rather unique aptitude for mastering and maintaining arcane machinery. Furthermore, the Legions made extensive use of super heavy tanks, such as the Fellblade, and were some of the earliest adopters, along with implementing the use of battle automata. Strategically, the Iron Hands preferred to operate alongside the Mechanicum rather than the Imperial Army. To them, human soldiers were an army of fragile and unfit beings, not suited for the rigors of the front line. The cold logic of the Iron Hands dictated that they only serve alongside the strongest and most precise tools employed in the Emperor's War. The Iron Hands Legion stands as a testament to the Ferrus Manus' vision of a perfected war machine, disciplined, unyielding, and devoid of weakness. Their rigid hierarchy and advanced arsenal formed them into an unquestionable force during the Great Crusade. Yet the inflexibility and merciless methods foreshadowed the challenges that they would face in the turbulent times to come. In the end, the Iron Hands embodied a duality of strength and fragility, and their unyielding pursuit of perfection was both their greatest asset and their most glaring flaw, and one that would be a reminder to many that even the strongest machine can falter if it cannot adapt to new inputs. It is important to note how important Ferrus Manus and his legion were in the advancement of the technological capabilities of the Imperium during the Great Crusade. Amongst their advancements and achievements were the development of the prototype for the Indomitus pattern tactical dreadnought armor, the foundational design for what would become the standard Terminator armor across the legions. Another hallmark of their intervention and inventions was the Stormbreaker pattern Thunderhammer, a weapon of immense destructive potential that would become a staple in the arsenals of Space Marine forces. Yet while there were many creations that they shared with the Imperium at large, the Iron Hands did not reveal all their secrets, deciding to keep a few close to the vest. Certain metallurgical techniques, along with weapon systems and cybernetic advancements, would remain closely guarded, ensuring that only the most loyal members of the Legion and the Mechanicum, who were their allies, would know this secretive knowledge. The Iron Hands' organizational structure is one deeply rooted in pseudo-feudal traditions, in particular those from their homeworld, designed to foster a culture of strength where weakness was punished without hesitation. Their ranks operated under a meritocratic system that rewarded capability and achievement over everything else. Those who failed to meet the Legion's exacting expectations would be quickly cast aside, often quite literally. This culture of discipline was further reinforced by Medusan pragmatism, a value system that aligned seamlessly with the cold, ruthless efficiency of the Legion. The volatile temperament that many of the Iron Hands shared with their Primarch would be tempered by the strict adherence to these cultural norms, channeled into productive aggression rather than uncontrolled fury. However, this rigid structure was not without its challenges, as competitions between clans was often fierce and driven by desire to earn favor, be it of their Primarch or of the God Emperor, and to gain additional recruits and resources. This rivalry was not merely ceremonial, as it had tangible effects on the distribution of the Legion's strength. Ferrus Manus, in his calculating logic, allocated resources to those clans that demonstrated the greatest capability, ensuring that success was indeed rewarded, while failure served as a dark and stark reminder and warning to others. At its core, the Iron Hands embodied the brutal philosophy of survival of the fittest and self-improvement. To thrive within the Legion was to adapt, grow, and overcome. Those who faltered and faced adversity would be met with marginalization or complete annihilation. This harsh creed permeated every aspect of the Iron Hands culture and operations, driving their relentless eternal pursuit of perfection further and further still. Yet the same philosophy, so ingrained in their identity, may have sown the seeds for their eventual crisis. The traumatic events of the dropsite massacre on Isstvan V shattered not only the Legion of the Iron Hands, but the psychological toll itself was rather profound. Ferris Manus' death, coupled with their inability to properly adapt to this catastrophic loss, left the Legion adrift, struggling to reconcile their rigid beliefs with the brutal realities of their utter and complete failure. The Iron Hands were left with a legacy of uncompromising relentlessness and innovation. Their technological contributions and discipline set them apart, even as the Horus Heresy came to an end. Yet their internal rivalries and inflexible creed underscored the limitations of their philosophy, leaving them vulnerable to unforeseen calamities. In the end, the Iron Hands epitomized the brutal duality of their namesake, forged in the fires of Medusa and hardened into an unbreakable machine. Yet, as they were so unbreakable, they were unable to bend and adapt, as the tides of fate demanded it. In the aftermath of the Horus Heresy, the Imperium of Man stood battered and betrayed, yet resolute, its survival contingent on reshaping the structures that had sustained it. Central to this effort was the Second Founding, a process that splintered the once vast Space Marine legions into smaller, more manageable, autonomous chapters. For the Iron Hands, whose forces were decimated during the betrayal of Isstvan V, this reorganization marked both a new beginning and the start of their long descent into isolation. The Iron Hands would be divided into 4 distinct chapters during the Second Founding. Amongst these were the Red Talons, the Brazen Claws, a third, yet unknown chapter, their identity remaining obscured in the shadows of Imperial record-keeping, while the fourth would retain the name and heraldry of the 10th Legion and be stationed on Medusa. These Astartes committed themselves to preserving the legacy of the Primarch Ferrus Manus, as their successors were not just physically separated from them, but also gradually fractured, but their shared purpose was gradually fractured along with their identity. Yet this remaining chapter diverged significantly from the ideals and organizational doctrina expounded by the Codex Astartes, charting a path both uniquely shaped by the unforgiving culture of Medusa and the death of their Primarch. As time has gone by, the Iron Hands have increasingly modeled its structure and traditions on the nomadic clans of Medusa, whose brutal pragmatism and obsession with strength mirrored the values instilled by their Primarch. These clans served as a primary recruiting pool for the chapter, reinforcing its unique cultural identity and fostering a stark divergence from other Codex-compliant Astartes forces. This transformation also reflected a deeper, more psychological shift within the chapter, as the catastrophic defeat at Isstvan V had left an indelible, never-healing wound on the Iron Hands, breeding an insulary nature that would become the defining characteristic of the chapter. Contact with successor chapters of the 10th Legion would continuously dwindle over time, as interactions with other first founding legions would as well. As the centuries unfolded, successor chapters themselves became increasingly reclusive in regards to their first founding legion. This was particularly true when looking at the Iron Hands, in large part due to their original focus on strength and self-resilience, as the Iron Hands proper began to obsess with self-resilience and self-reliance. The bonds that had been forged during the Great Crusade and the early days of the Imperium had, in all meanings of the word, began to fray, with the Iron Hands turning inward to nurse their wounds and fortify their resolve. The legacy of the 10th, a once singular unified force under Ferrus Manus, now stands divided, its sons scattered across the galaxy, each pursuing their own path in the shadows of their shared past. This profound isolation was born from both loss and necessity, and would come to be the most well-known feature of the Iron Hands, aside from their bionic enhancements. The recorded history of the 10th Legion, who would become known as the Iron Hands, stands as one of the most intact and well-preserved accounts from the original Space Marine legions. This preservation contrasts sharply with the fragmenting records of others, in particular that of the Blood Angels, which offers us a window into their genesis and the earliest days of their martial traditions, forged in the later waning days of the Unification Wars on Terra. Their formations aligned closely with the Emperor's original vision of the Legions Astartes, as purpose-built instruments of conquests for the coming Great Crusade. The 10th Legion's initial recruitment base was notably diverse, pulling aspirants from across Old Earth. These recruits hailed from disparate regions, including the towering quintative plate cities and the defeated territories of Sol's Stellax, each carrying unique cultural imprints that would become part of the greater whole of the 10th Legion. However, one recruitment source stands out as shaping the Legion's early identity the most: Old Albia, known for its deeply entrenched warrior culture and brutal martial traditions, as Albia contributed a substantial number of recruits, instilling in the 10th a fierce pride in its lineage of martial excellence, an influence that would be shared with the 14th Legion, cementing the 10th's reputation for an unyielding ferocity and style of combat that was deeply ingrained in the warrior ethos that predated even the first founding. The 10th's earliest campaigns and their first engagements were as components of larger task forces during the waning battles of the Unification Wars. However, their independent battles and battle honors began to accrue in the wider Sol System conflicts, showcasing their potential as a formidable force. In particular, two campaigns stand out. These would be the Scythers of the Macaran aggression, where they would operate in the confines of a sprawling mutant-infested Space Hulk, necessitating the 10th to show their disciplined ferocity, and their victory despite overwhelming odds led to many to see the unusually low casualties of the 10th as something to aspire to themselves. The other incident would be the Lyax enclave beneath Obrith's ice. In this operation, the 10th eradicated an alien enclave beneath the frozen caverns of a lifeless world. The harsh conditions of an airless, ice-entombed battlefield, which proved to be no barrier to their methodical advance. Again, they succeeded in delivering victory while maintaining a remarkably high operational efficiency and unbelievably low casualties. While these early campaigns highlighted the 10th Legion's adaptability and tenacity, they did not fully define their distinctive approach to war. These victories were won in confined, inhospitable environments that required precision and discipline, qualities that the Legion had already demonstrated in abundance prior to this. Still, the defining elements of their martial character, in particular the relentless, overwhelming assaults, and the fusion of iron discipline with methodical innovation, had yet to emerge fully. Yet, in the formative years, the seeds of what would become the Iron Hands' unyielding ethos would be sown. Their ability to overcome environmental hazards and crush relentless foes with minimal losses hinted at a cold efficiency that would later make them known as one of the Imperium's most feared and reliable forces. These early triumphs, however, would serve as a prelude to the greater deeds and the darker days that awaited the 10th as the galaxy descended into the fires of the Great Crusade and beyond.